been dipping back into the nostalgia films recently, going back to things that I remember really liking when I was a kid and watching them with Chris because she's never seen these films. So last night we watched Ladyhawke, which we have actually seen once before when we were dating. She doesn't remember it, but there were bits and pieces. She's like, "Isn't there a lady in this? But isn't the hawk the lady?" I was like, "Yeah, because you've seen the movie." It was really funny. But we did watch this last night, and I wanted to throw this out there because I like doing reviews of sci-fi films and fantasy films on my channel, and I feel like this is one of those great films that a lot of people have never watched. It has an absolutely atrocious soundtrack of like 80s synth pop, um, which is kind of similar, I guess, if I remember correctly. Doesn't Legends have an 80s synth pop music soundtrack as well? I'd have to. I haven't watched. Matter of fact, we should probably. Matter of fact, I'm gonna tell you right now, we're gonna watch Legends at some point because I haven't seen that in years, and Chris has never seen it. That's an early Tom Cruise flick, but I'm getting sidetracked. Ladyhawke. Rutger Hauer, right when he was first starting to get going as a leading actor, following on the heels of Blade Runner and Nighthawk and everything else he had been doing to establish himself in Hollywood. Michelle Pfeiffer at the peak of her, not that she ever peaked per se, but at the peak of her growing popularity in the 80s. And of course, Matthew Broderick when he was very young as the conflicted thief character uh, who is always talking to God. Um, I think this is one of those quintessential fantasy films of the 80s that you really need to watch. If you liked Willow, this is probably going to be right up your alley. It's not, anything super deep. The soundtrack does take a little bit away from it. Even Chris was like going, this music doesn't suit this film. And I was like, oh, I know. Everybody complains about like it's a great film, but the music is bad. And it's directed by veteran director Richard Donner, who also directed all the Lethal Weapon films, which I love. And of course, Timeline, which we're going to be reviewing soon because we haven't watched that movie in a long time. Chris and I, so we're gonna watch that again together and get that out on the channel too. So, great director, great cast, all of whom were sort of in the earlier stages of their careers, and I think that if you like just good swashbuckling fare, it's not swashbuckling, that's wrong to say, just good like fantasy stuff. This is pretty good. It's low fantasy or low tech. It's not the word I'm looking for. Low magic is the word I'm looking for. It's not low tech. So this is all shot in Italy, so you get a very, in my mind, picturesque medieval environment with old castles and rundown old villages that are all, things that existed. They didn't have to go out of their way to build sets. There's a great discussion recently from, I am blanking on his name. He directed Rogue One, Gareth. And he's doing The Creator, which is coming out. And I was watching the stuff behind The Creator, and when he's talking about, to build sets, it might cost you $250,000 to build one of these big sets for a film. So he's like, if you can find locations where you can fly the entire crew, and you're dealing with a small enough crew and a small enough cast, and you can fly them out on location, and you're covering their airfare and hotels and per diem and everything else, it's going to be way cheaper for your film than actually building that set, and you're going to be in these locations that make the film feel more real. And that's something they did a very good job with in Ladyhawke, was they used all these real locations from Italy around the countryside. So they got tons of great shots, great landscape shots, natural lighting. There were some of in the earlier parts of the film when Matthew Broderick's character is getting away, and he's in this little medieval tavern in the middle of nowhere. It's just a little hovel, and the way they've got like the sticks, as the walls, and then like they've got like these wooden poles going up, and lattice work across the top, and all the tomato plants and the grapes vines and everything woven and everything else. Chris was like, that's really well done. I was like, well, that's all, going back and looking at where the film was shot, that was all stuff that was already on location, so they didn't have to build anything, and it adds to that sense of realism. So all shot on location, really good stuff. It's not an overly complicated film. The overall principle is that his character, Howard's character, and her character, Michelle Pfeiffer's character, have been cursed by this priest, and by day he is human and she is in bird form, the hawk, and then at night she becomes human and he goes into the black wolf and becomes a wolf. And when they're in their animal forms, they don't remember anything about their human lives, and they're constantly cursed to forever be on the verge of seeing each other but never actually being able to hold each other's hands again. But yet when they're awake and human, they know that the other is, their animal companion is their human companion, and so they have this relationship that is cursed. And it's basically about 2 years of time go by, and we eventually get to the point where we find out that the curse can be reversed. They both have to face the priest who initially, cursed them, during the height of this eclipse when they can both be there in human form. So everything's sort of working towards that. The armor and the sword play in this film is not that good. It's not. The swords look ridiculously fake. The sword fights are mostly guys throwing each other around, and there are some swords clashing, but mostly this is just about fun dialogue and character acting. Matthew Broderick's character probably has the best dialogue in the film, because he is this thief character who's always talking to God and always questioning things and thinking, I promise, Lord, I'll never steal again if you get me out of this, scenario. And then 10 minutes later, he's stealing from God. And he's like, I know I promised, Lord, but you also know that I'm a weak-willed person and you'll forgive me. And, just it's quirky and it's fun. And his character arc as he comes to trust these two and help them in their quest to defeat the curses is very good. If I had to pick a favorite between the two actors here, Michelle Pfeiffer gave a good performance, but Rutger Hauer is in my take for really getting into the role of his character, really enjoying what he was doing, and I felt like he brought some gravitas to it, and it's some emotional scenes when he's thinking about her and looking at the hawk, and I think he did a very good job. Interestingly enough, I did not know this until I was reading up on this film after we watched it last night, that Kurt Russell was originally attached to play Rutger Hauer's role, and actually was in rehearsals and everything, and eventually had creative differences with the director and left, bringing Rutger Hauer to the forefront. And they tried to get a bunch of other people to play the role of the thief as well before settling. I mean, Danny DeVito was even in there at one point, which I thought was really interesting. And I didn't know the history of all of that, but it was also something where Richard Donner had tried for years to get it off the ground and finally was able to get financing and make this film a reality. So it is a fairly standard fantasy film. The action pieces are okay. I think most of this, for me, I enjoy the story more than anything else. The landscapes, the vistas. If I had to give this a rating out of 10, I'd probably get it a 7 out of 10. It's enjoyable enough. The music is notoriously bad. The fight scenes are not that great. The armor, not that great. But it's just the characters. The actors are doing a good job. They're throwing themselves into the role, and it makes for a fun performance and something that's enjoyable to watch. So if you've never seen the 80s film, it's 1985's Ladyhawke. I would highly recommend that you get out there and watch it today. That's my review. If you like this, don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the bell icon as we continue to review lots of different types of films and TV shows. Of course, all the games that we play here on the channel, daily streams at 11 a.m. Check out the playlists, join the Discord. See everybody in the next one.